Dona ni nega dagondi. Welcome to the BC Assembly of First Nations Youth Podcast. My name is Taylor Behn-Tsakoza. I'm Dene and I come from the Fort Nelson First Nation in northeastern BC. I am one of the two elected youth representatives here at the BCAFN, and I'm joined by my counterpart, Justen Peters, who is also an elected youth representative for the BCAFN.
Thanks for the introduction, Taylor. Together, Taylor and I work in our elected roles to advocate for First Nations youth voices in BC to be heard and connect with youth in various ways, including hosting an annual youth forum each year to understand what the priorities of the youth are, which helps us inform our work within our roles.
Yes, thanks, Justen. I think before we jump into talking about what we do as youth reps, I think it will be important to tell our listeners what the BCAFN is and the work that they do. So the BCAFN, also known as the BC Assembly of First Nations, is a provincial territorial organization representing the 204 First Nations of British Columbia. Each elected chief holds a seat in the BC Assembly, which convenes twice a year and mandates the direction for the BCAFN by way of resolutions that encompass advocating on behalf of First Nations in BC on collective priorities pertaining to First Nations rights, title, and interests.
We also have a regional chief who provides the political leadership and activities for the British Columbia Assembly of First Nations and is elected by the chiefs in assembly for a 3-year term. The chiefs in assembly are also responsible for casting their votes for youth, women, and elder representatives. The BCAFN is further governed by a board of 5 directors who all are elected to 3-year staggered terms. BCAFN is one of 10 regional organizations affiliated with the Assembly of First Nations, which is a national organization based in Ottawa that is similarly structured to the BC Assembly of First Nations, but at a national scale. So there are 634 First Nation communities across Canada, and each of their elected leaders have a say in the national priorities and mandates of the AFN assemblies as well, and the AFN standing for Assembly of First Nations.
Yes, and Justen, you mentioned that here at the BCAFN, the 204 First Nations, the chiefs of those nations, actually elect the youth, the women, and our elder representatives, which includes us. And so Justen and I each are serving 3 years terms, which are staggered. So Justen's term actually is up in 2021 since he was elected in, 2022, since he was elected in 2019. And I actually just completed my first year as youth rep as I was elected back in November 2020. So yeah, it's been exciting to know that chiefs have entrusted us to take on these roles. If any youth are listening and are wondering how you can put your name forward to be a youth representative, you actually have to meet some criteria before you can put your name forward. So you have to be a youth from a BC First Nation. So if you're part of the 204 or one of the 204, you can you will be eligible, and you have to be under 29. So I believe it's 16 to 29. And yeah, those are the 2 criteria. And I believe your chief has to put your name forward. So just some things to keep in mind as elections come up, and if you're interested in being part of that. But I do realize that was a lot of information, and it actually might be easier for Justen and I to break down a day in the life of a youth representative. So Justen, I'm wondering, what are some of your highlights of the work you've done here at the BCAFN over the last 2 years?
Cool. Thanks for that, Taylor. I'd say one of the biggest highlights of being a BCAFN youth representative is being engaged with community leadership and youth. One of the bestest, coolest things I did was just prior to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the BCAFN asked me to host an event at the BCAFN Business Forum in Prince George, which was in February 2020. And what the Business Forum was, it was a meeting of different First Nations chiefs and business leaders to showcase opportunities for business within British Columbia, whether it be through resource development or economic development or green energy, a whole array of different ways for communities to pursue growth and economic change. My role was to go out across the, not physically, but to search throughout the province for young Indigenous business leaders. And so what was cool about that is that I got to use my connections and got to ask a few people to come to the event at the Business Forum to share their story. And what was really cool about it is that some of the people that I reached out to were already doing so much in the world that they had their own portion of the Business Forum to talk about what they're doing. For instance, there was Trevor Yang, who was the First Nations Technology Council. He had an opportunity to present on his own behalf, as well as Chad Day, who was already coming there. But it was really cool to have that opportunity to reach out to Indigenous and First Nation youth who'd put the work into creating their own businesses and put the work into creating, for taking up the responsibilities of leadership, and not only giving them a chance to share their story for their own benefit, but to also inspire other First Nations youth and people of business and people of agency and power and whatnot. So prior to COVID-19, a lot of my job was going to different conferences and performing workshops with youth and getting the input from youth and going to different conferences about climate or economic development or mining or water or whatever. It was really, really cool. But of course, COVID happened and everything got thrown online. But even with that, it has its benefits because now I don't have to spend so much time traveling and you have more access to different meetings and different leaders and different sectors and whatnot. So I think the coolest thing is just the adaptability that's been enforced on us and the extra steps that we've had to take because prior to COVID or whatnot, the BCAFN, we didn't, the role of the youth rep was sort of just that, showing up to a conference, showing up to this, doing that. But with everything going online because of COVID, Taylor and I, with the help of the staff and some other people, we've taken steps towards having an online presence through creating a website, a blog series that's supposed to happen soon, and of course, this podcast stuff. So I'd say the highlight of this role is right now doing this podcast with you and the listener. But yeah, Taylor, what do you hope to accomplish with the remaining 2 years of your term as a female youth rep?
Yeah, and thanks, Justin. I think this definitely would have to be a highlight as well. It's super cool to be doing a podcast and to be sharing it with youth across BC is just so exciting and like cool to be a part of. But I think looking forward to the next 2 years, I mean, I'm really hoping that COVID ends at some point and you and I can actually meet in person because fun fact, we have never met in person. Since I started last year, we've only ever seen each other through a computer screen. So I look forward to being in person and to engaging with youth and leaders and even the staff of BCAFN would be a great start, I think, to what I hope to achieve, which is really just including youth in conversations. And, there's always limitations to Zoom. Talking times seem to be cut shorter. I think just the human interaction is also just a lot trickier. So yeah, just continuing to bring youth voices forward. Because I think here, what I've been learning anyway over the last year for what our roles are as youth representatives is being and bringing that youth voice to the table. And I got to be honest, when I was running for the youth rep position last year, I had no idea what the BCAFN was. I didn't know what the youth reps did. I know I just saw them everywhere. And I saw them, I believe I heard about your business forum, because that's when I was like, what? They got to like host? That's so cool. Like the BCAFN really believes that youth deserve a seat and that they can be heard by, and even just capable of running an event. So I knew, I was like, I want to do that. How can I be a part of it? And so I put my name forward, and I contacted my chief, and she had signed that paper that, you know, made it official that I could have my name on the ballot. And yeah, it's been a really exciting time to be a part of the BCAFN. And I think like the work that you and Jade did before I came on really has set the has really blazed the trail for me to come in and do the things that I want to do. And one of them was actually this podcast. So I just really raised my hands up to the youth reps that came before me for really, allowing me to be here and to thrive. But yeah, I think as we continue to have these conversations, I'm really excited to also maybe answer those questions for other youth who are wondering, like, what do we do, and all those good things. But I digress. So Justin, I'm also curious on what your last year of your term is going to look like. What are some things that you want to accomplish, and what are do you have any hopes, or can you give us a little insider scoop on whether you're going to run again?
Cool. Thank you for that, Taylor. I just want to touch on something you had just said about not knowing what the BCAFN, and we sort of kind of, we basically just said what it was like a few minutes ago, about it's a provincial territory organization and it's the Assembly of First Nation, a lot of this dry definitional stuff, like actually what it is, that doesn't make for real great conversation. But it's on the website and it's on the podcast. That's what it is on paper. But I was very curious as what the BCAFN actually was, because I used to work for the provincial government in one of the ministries of the provincial government that worked with First Nations a lot. And whenever there was a meeting with the BCAFN, it was always seen as important. Like, there's the BCAFN, you're not late, you want to talk to them because they have all the information. And like touching on what we said before, the BCAFN is an advocacy group for the 204 First Nations in British Columbia. It's an assemblage of everything, because say one First Nation will have different interests than another First Nations, depending on location, population, access to resources, tourism, where they are. I was going to say, like, if they're near a pipeline or if they're near a lake, or don't know the word off the top of my head, but there's different interests for every First Nations, but there's also a lot of commonality and shared interests across First Nations. So it being an assembly of First Nations, it's exactly that. It's an assembly of First Nations to work together and support each other on common ground. But yeah, it's a weird thing. You just see the name pop up. It's like a very powerful brand. It's a very powerful brand just because of the words and the importance and the work that they do for policy and mandates and advocacy and stuff like that. But how I got on is that I just showed up to a meeting and there was an opening, and I was like, I feel like I do a good job at this. So I did what you said before. I did my application, got support from my band, made myself sound good, and got support from the board and staff and the chiefs and whatnot. But in my last year of, to sum it up, if I can, being part of the BCAFN Youth Representative, having this role, it's like having an advanced course on First Nation leadership with real life experience, because you kind of just get thrown into it. Like, you could go to school, you can learn about treaties, you can learn about land rights, you can learn about all this stuff, but you just get thrown in the meetings and you get to see how things actually work. And it's interesting. Like, I feel like I don't know. If I went to go get a degree in First Nation studies, I'd get A+, because I'm seeing how it's working. But in my last year, I would like to create, with the help of the BCAFN staff and Taylor as well, to create a how-to manual for future youth reps. So they sort of have an idea of like what their responsibilities are, what to expect, how to present themselves and whatnot, because no one's perfect. Like we don't know who, you know, but just as sort of a guide and sort of to answer these questions of what is BCAFN, what is your role and whatnot. And if I can do my part to act as a mentor, whether or not I get another term, I'd still like to stay connected with the BCAFN just so that my passion can be fulfilled, because I've grown up passionate about culture, passionate about the justice of First Nations, and, you know, seeing us reclaim our culture and our land and all that great stuff. So in my last year, I'd like to also spread awareness about First Nation issues in BC, through our blogs, through our podcasts, through just engaging with First Nations youth and leadership at gatherings both online and in person.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. The work you've done even before I came on was so impressive, and just hearing your plans for the future is just like, makes me excited. There's so much. I think youth are in a really powerful position to make change in our province, in our country. So yeah, it's really, I think you were talking about the handbook, and I know we've been having discussions about it, and I know, like I mentioned, I didn't know what the BCAFN was even when I was running. When I did the candidates forum, I was just like trying to go off the website, but you were right. It's like this real life experience is like none other. Like you can't even go to school for this. It's so crazy that like you and I get to do this every day. And I think that handbook is gonna be so useful, because like, to go a little bit more in depth of what Justin and I do day to day, we had the opportunity to attend BCAFN's monthly board meetings. So we get to have the experience of like what it's like to be on a board, how boards run. And again, that was experience I had very little knowledge of before coming onto the BCAFN. So it's been really exciting to be part of that. I'll also mention, and we'll probably get into depth into this in future episodes, but also as part of being the BCAFN Youth Reps, we actually sit on the AFN's National Youth Council. And so to kind of describe or to provide more info on what the National Youth Council is, there's 10 regions that make up the AFN. And so BC is one of them. And there's a female and male rep from each of those 10 regions. And we come together as a council of 20 youth reps to make up the National Youth Council. And I mean, we do a lot at the national level, which again, I'm sure we'll get into probably in future episodes, because there's a lot that happens at the national level, especially as youth reps. But yeah, when I was applying for the BCAFN, I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And I knew people in the National Youth Council. I thought that was a separate thing that the AFN does, but no, it's like, it's a regional, like the regional youth reps make up that council. So yeah, there's so many moving parts to being a youth rep. Of course, Justin mentioned, you know, speaking at conferences, moderating panels, attending meetings is part of it, but there's so much more that Justin and I are very fortunate to do, and that includes projects like this podcast, and also doing things such as the youth forum that we host every March. But yeah, I just wanted to provide a little bit more context. I know there's just so much we could talk about, and there's so much that we do, but that's just a little bit about it. I hope people keep listening to learn more about all the things we get to do, because it is a really cool position that we hold. And I would just love to tell everyone about it, which we will in future episodes. But with that, this has been such a fun first episode, Justin. It's been such a pleasure to share a bit about ourselves and the work that we get to do. We thought with this first episode, it'd be great to just start off with explaining, like, who we are, what the BCAFN is, and what we do as youth reps. But again, stick around for future episodes, because this will be one of many that we'll hold on various topics.
Cool. Thanks, Taylor. And I just wanted to compliment you as well on your character, and that I really do truly think that you were meant for this role because of your work you've done with kids, with health and exercise and stuff like that. And the way you present yourself, and like you're doing a great job. So I just wanted to say that. And to anyone listening who's stuck around this long, thank you. But we're sharing this information truly so that we can connect to more youth in British Columbia, First Nations youth, because we want to extend these opportunities as far as we possibly can. Right now, how it's set up, there's just room for 2 youth reps in British Columbia. I'm just going to say it's going to be a very exciting series, and we look forward to being able to connect you with other youth to hopefully offer some interesting insight and content. On our next episode, we will be interviewing Jade Chingji, who is the elected youth counselor at the McLeod Lake Indian Band, who will be talking to us about her advocacy for better education in her community. She has advocated and sought funding for a museum and archive that is underway. She has endured accountability in her school district, and she has worked with project funders to get each youth in her community a laptop in the past year. Also throwing this in, she's also working to increase moose herds and caribou herds in her traditional territory. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is super cool. Very impressive. Really looking forward to that discussion with Jade. Thank you, Mussy Cho, for everyone who tuned in. I'm Taylor Behn-Tsakoza.
And I'm Justin Peters, and I like to say white lim lim, and thank you for listening to the BC Assembly of First Nations Youth Podcast. And then outro music.